Hello and welcome to my new Guitar Nerdery video. I guess most of you have already heard about the term church modes or simply modes, modal scales. What is this? Another term for this is ionian system, and it consists out of different minor and major scales. But different minor, different major, if you do not really understand what this means, I want to show you today. I want to visualize for you the difference on the guitar. What is the difference of the modal minor and major scales? I'm going to visualize it for you on the guitar by using 3-note per string patterns, scale shapes, and interval shapes. Just in case you are also interested in learning 3 notes per string scale shapes, I've made a video about that. It's Guitar Nerdery number 76. And if you're not familiar with interval patterns on the guitar fretboard, I've made a couple of videos about that topic too. It's Guitar Nerdery 116, 117 and my recent video 135. I really recommend to watch them. It's very interesting stuff. Just as a reminder, let me give you a brief overview of the topic modes. The first scale, the Ionian scale, is actually the major scale. And here everything is explained in C major. The most important thing now to understand this scale is to understand its construction. It consists out of whole tones and half tones. Every scale has a special formula of these intervals within one octave. And the Ionian scale, the major scale, has the formula whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone. Keep this in mind. This is the key, the basis of everything that follows now. Good to see. The Ionian system consists out of 7 scales. What's that all about? In the C Ionian scale we have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B and the octave C. And this is the C Ionian scale when C is the root. The note D here, the second note, is to the root C, the major second. The note E is the major third, makes it major because the third determines if it's minor or major. The note F is the perfect fourth, the G is the perfect fifth, the A is the major sixth, and the B is the major seventh, and the C is the root again. So where do them other 6 scales come from? It's very simple. I can determine the second note D as the root, and then everything would start from there. You see this with that second scale. It's called the Dorian scale. Here we start with the note D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. We use the same notes, but the root is now the note D. Why is this now a different scale? Because them half-tone steps here of the Ionian scale, which are positioned here between the 3rd and the 4th note and the 7th and the octave, they move now by defining the second note as the root, 1 step down. So now we have them half-tone steps between the 2nd and the 3rd note and between the 6th and the 7th note. And that makes a huge difference. If we look at them intervals that Dorian scale is consisting of, we have the note E, that is the major second to D. Okay, we had that earlier at the Ionian scale. There we had also a major second, but the 3rd note, here we have the half-tone steps. So from the root it's a whole tone and a half tone, 1 half tone less than the 3rd of the Ionian scale, and that makes it a minor 3rd. So the whole scale is a minor scale, and that's a huge difference. And then we have a perfect 4th, perfect 5th, the major 6th, and a minor 7th. The G was the perfect 5th, it's now the perfect 4th. The A was the major 6, it's now the perfect 5th. The B was the major 7th, it's now the major 6. And the C was the root, but now it's the minor 7th. So we're dealing with the same notes, but because we defined another note as the root, and by moving them halftone steps, we give the whole scale a complete different character. Because it's all about musical intervals. They determine the sound of scales and chords. And when a scale or a chord consists out of different intervals, it surely sounds different then. The next 5 scales, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian and Locrian, come into existence by doing the same thing to them. When I define of the C major scale the 3rd note as the root, then I get the Phrygian scale, because again, them halftone steps had moved one step down. The same with the Lydian scale, the same with the Mixolydian scale, which would be then the 5th note as the root. The 6th note as the root makes the Aeolian scale, and making the 7th note of the Ionian scale the root, it makes the Locrian scale. If we categorize the Ionian system, the church modes, into minor and major scales, we have 3 major scales then. The Ionian, the Lydian and the Mixolydian, the 1st, the 4th and the 5th, and the 2nd, 3rd, 6th and 7th scale, the Dorian, Phrygian, Aeolian and Locrian scale, Locrian with that extra diminished 5th, them all are minor scales. 3 major scales, 4 minor scales. So that means 3 scales have something in common. The major scales, they are all major, and 4 scales have something in common. They are all minor. But there's also a difference. And what is that difference? And the difference is very important, because earlier I told you it's all about the musical intervals. Differences in intervals makes different sound. To avoid now that this is becoming very dry and boring music theory, let's make it organic for us as guitar players, because I need this too. I think everything with my guitar, actually. I never think in notes and clefs. If you ask me what is the diminished 5th of D, then I can tell you it's the A flat, but not because I have these clefs and notes in my head, because I have learned interval shapes. I put them on the note D. I also know that this is the note D. I have learned this. And then I can simply read that this is an A flat. Another example, if you ask me what is the difference between the Aeolian and the Dorian scale, I can immediately tell you it's the 6th, because I have not only learned interval shapes, but also a bunch of scale shapes, and I also know all the notes on the fretboard. I have an imaginary fretboard in my head, and on this imaginary fretboard I can compare those 2 scale shapes, and I see the difference. I can visualize the difference. I see it's the 6th. Aeolian mode has a minor 6 and Dorian has a major 6. And we will get to this in a few. I told you that all scales have a special formula, order of notes they are consisting of. And that makes them what they are. And the Ionian scale had the formula whole tone, halftone, whole tone, halftone. And now I can transpose this in all 12 keys, because every time when I use this formula I get an Ionian scale. The only thing that is different then, it's the key. If I do this from the note C, I get the C major scale. C, and then whole tone, halftone, whole tone, halftone. G, whole tone, halftone, whole tone, halftone. This makes it the G major scale. It consists out of the same formula as the C major scale, only G is the root now. Another example, A as the root. A, whole tone, half tone, whole tone, whole tone, whole tone, half tone. The A major scale with the same formula. I could do this now with all them other 6 modes. I could define the formula they are consisting of and then start at a point, at a note where I want to start them and play that scale. Because if I would learn every scale for itself, I wouldn't get an immediate connection between them all. And that makes it, again, less organic. I want to have it very logical and easy. And here, them 3 notes per string scale shapes come in. The building of them 3 notes per string scale shapes happens the same way as all the modes are built up. The first step is putting the Ionian scale with the formula whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone on one string, on the low E string. And I'm gonna do this from the note A. A, and then whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone. Here's the octave. And every note now is a starting point for a new scale shape of 3 notes per string. 3 notes per string is the concept, and having that concept, there's only one way in each position to build up a scale shape. It will always look the same if you do this or if I did this. Let me show you. The Ionian scale, whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone. Now I have to be aware of which notes that a Ionian scale is consisting of. It's A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, and G sharp. 3 sharps. These are the notes. So, the concept, 3 notes per string. A, B, C sharp, I can play on one string. The next note, the D, must be on the next string because I have already played 3 notes on the first string. So I switch to the next string, to the A string, D, E, F sharp, 3 notes. The next note would be G sharp, but that is the 4th note on that string, so I have to play it on the next string. And so on. And that way, there's only one way on a standard tuned guitar to build up a shape that looks like this. It can never look different. Step 2 is now to cover the whole fretboard with 3 notes per string scale shapes of that same scale. So I can start, for example, with the 2nd note and play one. I know it's A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp. I start at the note B, C sharp. Now I can play D on the E string because it's only the 3rd note, but the next note, the E. Now I have to switch to the next string, E, F sharp, G sharp. This is now the 3rd note, and the next note, the A, I play on the next string. And then I get this shape. No other way. And I can do this with all 7 positions. The modes came into existence by defining each of them 7 notes as a new root. And here we do this practically the same way. We define each note as a new starting point for a new pattern. Because building the modes and them scale shapes up in an equal way, we get an immediate connection and understanding. How can we now visualize the difference between them modes? By using them scale shapes. The first scale shape started at the 1st note of the Ionian scale, and that way we get also the same formula. Whole tone, half tone, whole tone, whole tone, half tone. And the second scale shape is built up by starting at the second note of the first scale shape. When I start here on the second note, this is now here the first note. So we have 2/3 of overlapping here. These notes are the same as this, but we get one note further. That's the idea of them scale shapes, because if we do this 7 times, we get to the octave where the first scale shape is again but 1 octave higher, and we have covered the whole fretboard. In my example, I used the A ionian scale, put that on one string, and each note was a new starting point for a new shape. That way we got 7 shapes. But actually, we can also see it like that. We can define every new starting point as a new root. And that way we could give them 7 scale shapes also mode names. The first shape here, when we define the first note as the root, then it's the major scale, the Ionian scale, because then we get the formula whole tone, half tone, whole tone, whole tone, half tone. That half tone step that happens here in first pattern between the third and the fourth note happens here already between the second and the third note. So it's a logical thing. It's exactly the same as this if we see it that way. This would be the Ionian pattern if this is the root. When here the starting note is the root, then this is the Dorian pattern. But this must be the root then. If the third note of pattern number 3 or the third note of the Ionian scale is this note, then this is the Frisian pattern. This makes the Lydian pattern, Mixolydian pattern, Aeolian pattern and Locrian pattern. That's very cool. This way now we have started to visualize scales, modes. We always do this as guitar players when we are learning scales. Also, if you first learned the pentatonic scale, you learned a scale shape, you visualized a scale. I guess you didn't always think about the notes you're playing. You always thought about that pattern. These notes are right, and the notes that are not in that pattern are not right. And to make the visualizing now even easier to understand, I reduce each of them patterns to its first octave. And that's from here to here, because every scale happens within 1 octave. And as a next final step to make them 1 octave scale shapes now comparable, I do not play them from them former starting points. I play them all from the same starting point. That way we get a visual overlapping, and that makes comparison pretty easy. I'm gonna compare now the major scales of the Ionian system. The first, the Ionian scale, the Lydian and the Mixolydian scale. The first, the fourth and the fifth. And I use for this the first octave of shape number 1, the first octave of shape number 4, and of course the first octave of shape number 5. The first scale shape, the Ionian scale shape, here we have a major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, and the major seventh, and the octave. Let's compare this to the Lydian scale, the 4th scale. So to do this, I play now shape number 4. I guess you immediately have noticed that there's only one note different. The 4th note. Instead of Lydian, has an augmented fourth. That's the only difference between Ionian and Lydian. But it's actually not a small difference. It has a really different sound. Now let's compare it with the Mixolydian scale. It's scale number 5 in the Ionian system. So I use now scale shape number 5. We see the 7th note, this one. This is different. The Ionian scale had here a G sharp, and Mixolydian, the first 6 notes are the same, but the 7th note is a G. Also, in comparison, Ionian and Mixolydian have 1 note only in difference. Comparing Mixolydian and Lydian, there we have 2 notes different, because Lydian had an augmented fourth and a major 7th, while Mixolydian has a perfect fourth and a minor 7th. Let's now compare the minor scales. The 2nd, the Dorian, the Frisian, the 3rd, Aeolian, the 6th, and also the special Locrian scale with the diminished 5th. The Aeolian scale, the 6th mode, is called in classical music the natural minor scale. Our ears are very tuned to this scale, so I start with this scale first. And to do this, it's scale number 6. I use scale shape number 6. Scale shape number 6, Aeolian in A. Let's analyze this with interval patterns. Major 2nd, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, minor 6th, minor 7th, and octave. Let's use this as reference scale to compare it with them other scales. Let's take scale shape number 2 to compare it with Dorian, because Dorian is mode number 2, scale shape number 2. When the first note is the root, when the starting note is the root, it equals the Dorian mode. Again, like with the major modes, 1 note different only. The 6th, the Aeolian scale had a minor, and the Dorian scale has a major 6th. That's the only difference. Let's compare it with Frisian. Frisian is the 3rd mode, so I use the 3rd scale shape. So the difference here is obvious just in the beginning, because here we have a minor 2nd. Aeolian and also Dorian had a major 2nd. But what Aeolian and Frisian have in common is the minor 6th. The major 6 was the difference of the Dorian mode. The Dorian mode and the Frisian mode differ in 2 notes, in the 6th and in the 2nd. And the last scale for comparison is the Locrian mode. I told you it's a special one with the diminished 5th. It's the 7th mode, so I use scale shape number 7. Here are 2 notes different compared with the Aeolian scale. Here we have a minor 2nd instead of a major 2nd of Aeolian. And we have also that diminished 5th, and Aeolian has a perfect 5th. And comparing the Locrian mode with the Frisian mode, there's only 1 note different, because both have that minor second in the beginning. And the difference lies in the diminished fifth of the Locrian mode, because the Frisian mode has a perfect fifth. The greatest difference is between the Dorian mode and the Locrian mode. The Dorian mode has a difference of 3 notes. It's major 6 versus minor 6. The fifth, it's perfect fifth versus diminished fifth. And it's the second, major second versus minor second. Learn to visualize music, music theory on your guitar. I think it's the most essential way also to memorize music on your instrument. This was it for today. A lot of talking this time, I have to admit, but sometimes it has to be that way. If you not already have, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you found this interesting, and I'm looking very forward to see you next time.